Okay, so let's get into this. It really feels like a high-stakes chess game playing out in finance right now. You know, a key piece suddenly gets taken off the board and then boom, it's replaced by someone whose whole strategy can just redraw everything.
Yeah, that's actually a really good way to put it. What happened last week at the Federal Reserve?
Yeah.
Well, it sets things up for a pretty fascinating look at what might be coming.
Exactly. And that's what we want to unpack today. This potential appointment could genuinely reshape, one of the most powerful financial institutions globally.
It's not an exaggeration at all. The speed and the symbolism are really striking. You had Fed Governor Cooler announcing his resignation, effective August 8th. Then, literally the day before, August 7th, the president tweets his intention to appoint Stephen Moore.
Right. So this isn't just some routine shuffle.
No, not at all. It's a really critical moment if you want to understand how monetary policy could shift.
Yeah.
And it puts that whole idea of central bank independence, which, we often just assume is standard in developed economies, right under the microscope.
And it matters directly, right? It affects everything from mortgage rates to, global market stability.
Precisely. Your mortgage, your savings, the health of the whole economy.
So that's our mission for this deep dive. Figure out who Stephen Moore actually is, what his, frankly, pretty radical ideas about the Fed are, and the specific changes he's pushing for. We need to explore what this could mean for the Fed's independence, the economy, and that crucial treasury market. It feels essential for anyone trying to grasp where things are headed financially.
Definitely. And, understanding these big shifts often benefits from a wider lens, looking at historical context and global dynamics.
That's a great point. And actually, speaking of context, we wanted to mention Hui Wang's excellent series, A History of China. It's available on Amazon. It's incredibly well-researched, offers really deep insights into China's history. The newest volume, The Liao Dynasty, is just out in ebook and paperback.
Yeah, it's a fantastic resource for anyone wanting that deeper historical understanding, which is so valuable right now.
Absolutely. Okay, so back to the U.S. and Stephen Moore. Governor Cooler steps down. The president moves instantly via social media. Our sources are saying his term might only be 6 months max, but his influence could be outsized. Why is that? What makes him such a potential game changer?
Well, Moore isn't just, filling a seat. He's the president's chief economic advisor. And importantly, he's widely seen as the main architect behind the Mar-a-Lago Accord.
Right. That economic blueprint, people talked about deregulation, tax cuts.
Exactly. That whole pro-growth agenda. Yeah. So he's not just an advisor. He's deeply tied into the president's economic thinking. Putting him on the Fed board, even for a short time, it signals a very clear intention to push that philosophy right into the Fed's decision-making.
And his philosophy on the Fed itself is, it's pretty controversial, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. He fundamentally questions the whole idea of Fed neutrality and independence.
We saw that Barron's article he wrote in 2024. He basically argued the Fed was never really independent anyway, and the line between fiscal and monetary policy, gone, collapsed.
Yeah, that's his core argument. It's a direct challenge to, decades of how the Fed has operated and how it's perceived.
And he connects this inflated self-image, as he calls it, to some serious problems.
He does. He argues this supposed independence has actually led to things like groupthink, overregulation, hurting the economy, poor accountability, and even weak responses to inflation.
And he's blunt about it. He literally says the Fed's independence must end?
Exactly. No mincing words there. And from Wall Street's perspective, or, traditional finance folks, this is more than just criticism. Our sources say they see it as radical rebellion, even heresy.
Heresy, yeah. Because it hits at the predictability they rely on.
Precisely. It challenges the very foundation of a neutral, predictable central bank.
Okay, heresy seems fitting when you look at the actual reforms he wants. These aren't small adjustments.
No, they're sweeping, really structural changes.
Let's break some down. First, cutting governors' terms from 14 years down to 8. Okay, that's significant. But then, giving the president power to just remove them, at will, that basically eliminates their job security. Why is that specific change so critical?
Well, it completely undermines the insulation the Fed is supposed to have from, short-term political wins. Those 14-year terms, the protection from being fired by the president, that's all meant to let them make tough economic calls without worrying about the next election cycle.
Right. Decisions based on data, not politics.
Exactly. Moore's idea turns them into, essentially, political appointees who serve at the president's pleasure. It blurs that line completely.
And he also goes after the revolving door, right, between the Fed and Treasury.
Yeah, he points fingers at figures like Janet Yellen, Timothy Geithner people moving between top jobs at the Fed and Treasury.
Yep.
His argument is that this creates a kind of elite group tied to Wall Street, he suggests, that ends up controlling both monetary and fiscal policy.
Making the president just a figurehead in his view.
That's the implication, that the real power lies with this interconnected financial group.
Okay, what else? He wants Congress to control the Fed's budget.
Yes, put it under congressional appropriations.
Now, how the Fed funds itself seems technical, but it's key to its independence, isn't it?
Absolutely. Right now, the Fed makes its own money, mostly from interest on securities it holds, and sends the profit back to the Treasury.
So if Congress held the purse strings,
lawmakers could question and potentially cut spending. That includes things like the interest the Fed pays to banks, including foreign ones, on reserves they hold at the Fed.
And what happens if those cuts come at a bad time, like during a crisis?
That's the major concern. Think about a big European bank suddenly needing U.S. dollars, a liquidity crisis. The Fed usually steps in quickly, providing dollar swaps or loans. If its budget, its ability to act fast, is suddenly subject to political fights or cuts in Congress,
It could freeze things up.
it could severely disrupt global financial markets. Imagine the Fed being unable to act decisively because of a budget fight. It could trigger panic. It injects politics right into emergency financial operations.
Okay, so budget control, term limits, removal power. What else is on his agenda?
He also wants to separate monetary policy setting interest rates from bank supervision. So take away the Board of Governors' regulatory power over banks.
The Fed currently does both, right? Manages money supply and oversees banks.
Correct. It plays that dual role.
Yeah.
Moore thinks they should be split.
But maybe the most radical idea, the one described as a precise and sophisticated design plan, is about voting power.
Ah, yes. This one could really change the internal power balance. It's about the FOMC, the committee that sets interest rates.
How does that work now?
Right now, it's the 7 governors in D.C., the New York Fed president, and then 4 other regional Fed presidents who rotate in. So 12 voting members total, but only 5 presidents at any given time.
And Moore wants.
All 12 regional Fed presidents to have a permanent vote, all the time.
Okay, so that shifts power away from the D.C.-based governors and the chair.
Significantly. It dilutes their voting bloc.
Yeah.
But here's the really clever or maybe controversial part. His plan would also let state governors remove those regional bank officials.
State governors removing Fed officials. Wow.
Yeah, that directly injects state-level partisan politics right into the regional feds. You'd likely see appointments and removals happening along party lines.
So the goal seems pretty clear then. Dilute the board's power, politicize the regional banks.
And the result is the president gets indirect control. Through allies likely appointed via partisan state governors, the president could build a voting majority on the FOMC.
Giving monetary policy leadership back to the White House, effectively.
Exactly. That's why the source calls it a very precise and sophisticated design. It's a fundamental restructuring aimed at political control, moving away from that independent model we've had for over a century.
Which brings us back to heresy and radical rebellion from Wall Street's view.
Understandably, they see it threatening the stable, apolitical policy environment they depend on.
Now, Moore's been nominated, but does he need Senate confirmation? Seems like there's some debate on that point.
Yeah, reports are mixed. Given it's filling a vacancy midterm, the process isn't entirely clear, but confirmation might still be required.
And even some Republicans in the Senate are already pushing back, defending Fed independence.
That's right. They see it as a core principle for a developed economy. This isn't just about economics for them. It touches on something deeper.
You mean this idea of money power?
Exactly. The concept that controlling the currency should be separate from the day-to-day political branches, executive, legislative, judicial. Some observers, particularly in finance, almost see this financial power as, well, supreme in Western democracies, kind of sitting above the usual checks and balances.
And Moore's plan challenges that directly.
It aims to bring that perceived supreme financial power firmly under the umbrella of political control, specifically presidential control. It's a fundamental shift in the balance of power.
It's a huge philosophical debate, really. But let's be practical. His term is short, 6 months max. Can he realistically achieve all this?
Probably not. A full overhaul, changing laws, restructuring the Fed like that in 6 months, highly unlikely. The institution is just too established.
So what's the real impact then, if he's confirmed?
Well, even without major legislative changes, his presence alone could really shift the conversation inside the Fed. He'd be introducing a perspective that's very different, very political, into a body that usually tries to operate by consensus on economic data. And critically, just having him there pushing these ideas could damage the Fed's reputation for independence. And that reputation itself is a valuable asset.
Even if no policies change immediately.
Right. Reputational damage can affect market confidence, how investors view U.S. debt, the dollar. It matters.
And it's worth noting he can't become Fed chair in this short term, right?
Correct. That requires a full term. So this isn't about him taking the top job immediately. It's more about influence.
Although it is interesting who he praises publicly, like Governor Waller, for getting inflation calls right.
Yeah, that's a signal. It suggests Waller might be someone the president favors, perhaps for future leadership roles, maybe even chair eventually. It shows who might be seen as allies.
Okay, what about the timeline? Congress is on recess now.
Right, August recess. So if confirmation is needed, it could take 4 to 8 weeks. He might even miss the September FOMC meeting.
But if he gets confirmed, he joins Waller, maybe another potential ally. That gives the president's view potentially 3 voices out of 7 on the Board of Governors.
Exactly. Not a majority on the board itself, but like the source says, probably enough to alter the tone of meetings. It could create more internal friction, make consensus harder to reach, and constantly keep his reform ideas on the table.
So bottom line, a full Fed revolution seems unlikely short term.
Unlikely. But his influence could still be significant, especially if it chips away at that perception of Fed independence.
And the Treasury market is particularly sensitive to that perception.
Very sensitive. If investors start to doubt the Fed's independence, if they think monetary policy might become purely political, they could demand higher interest rates on U.S. debt to compensate for the extra risk.
Which means higher borrowing costs for the government.
And potentially higher rates across the economy for everyone. Trust in the Fed's independence is really a cornerstone of market stability and the dollar's global role.
Okay, so summing up the deep dive, we've got this clash between the traditional model and independent central bank as a pillar of stability and Stephen Moore's really radical vision for political alignment, presidential control.
It really gets to the heart of how economic power should be structured, doesn't it? It's not just theory. It's about who calls the shots.
Which leads to a final thought for you, the listener. What might the long-term fallout be if this widely held belief in central bank independence starts to seriously erode?
Yeah, what could that mean for financial stability, not just in the U.S., but globally? How might it change the balance of power within governments?
It's definitely something to keep thinking about as this whole situation unfolds.
And understanding these kinds of potential shifts really benefits from that broader historical and geopolitical view. Which brings us back to Hui Wang's A History of China. The latest volume, The Liao Dynasty, available in ebook and paperback, offers great context on how power dynamics and institutions evolve over time.
A really valuable perspective. Well, thank you for tuning into this deep dive.
We look forward to joining you again next time.